Okay, so I was born in Dayton, Ohio. However, I am living in Georgia, and I've been here for really ever. I feel like I was really only born in Ohio, and I would go visit, when I was a kid to see my grandparents and other family. But I have to claim Georgia now and essentially be a Georgia peach out here. Anyway, to be honest, when people ask me about my childhood, I don't really remember that much of it, and I think it's just because of like a lot of things I had to do medically. So I've had a lot of surgeries and stuff like that, and I had to take a lot of medications. So I think that that's also affected like my memory. So I really don't remember much of like what it was like growing up, other than what people tell me, like my parents and stuff like that. And all of my memories, I feel like, are related to food or something super traumatic, right? So yeah, that's a tough question. And I've been asked that so many times. I'm like, oh, what's it like being, when you were a kid? And I just don't know how to answer it, because I really don't know what it was like growing up. I mean, I typically only remember stuff probably some of high school and then beyond that, but nothing earlier than that, than like random things, you know what I mean, that I'm kind of piecing together. So when I was in kindergarten, I do remember that, so I have rods in my legs, which are to help keep them straight and also help with reducing fractures in my legs. And so I had a rod and it like poked out through the skin, because I was going to be needing surgery anyway. So essentially you kind of learn early on that you're pretty different, just because of all the things that I had to deal with. So it wasn't a conversation or something that I feel like my parents had to have with me. It was just naturally things that kind of occurred in my life. And I broke a lot of bones, growing up. So I'm sure that there was that realization that you're different pretty much from the jump. So yes, I do have autism, so I am autistic, and autism looks different for everybody. I mean, that's why it's a spectrum. So you could have autism and not know it. Like, some people go undiagnosed, some people don't. It just depends on how it's displayed. Like, I have a cousin that also is autistic, and he's nonverbal, so he was diagnosed fairly early on, pretty much like probably as a toddler, and so it really just displays in people differently. As for me, a lot of it has to do with like social interactions and sensory issues and things like that, and then just a lot of other things that combine. But for most people that would meet me, they wouldn't notice that I'm autistic first. They would probably recognize that I'm in a chair and short, and that's just due to how my autism is displayed, but also because I was diagnosed later in life, that also could come into play of why my autism displays differently, because a lot of the things that culturally speaking are seen as like rude, like not looking people in the eye, which is something that goes along with autism. A lot of people that are autistic, we don't look people in the eye, but of course in the black community, typically that's really like look people in the eye. But because I wasn't diagnosed, like there were a lot of things that I would do that, because my parents didn't know or recognize as autism, you're kind of trying to correct, right? And so that's why, at least for me, I feel like when people tell me they wouldn't know I'm autistic, is because I don't really think I ever got that opportunity to really, you know what I mean? Because like a lot of things were just tried to be corrected. So it's like that own kind of natural therapy, I suppose. But yeah, so I am autistic, and that's just like a small piece though. I feel like that's like a small layer of like everything else. I always say I have a grab bag of disabilities, to be honest, because it's like take your pick, like autism, and then I got osteogenesis imperfecta type 3, which is my brittle bone disorder, and so I'm hard of hearing, and I have hearing aids too. So there's just like so many layers to everything that I got going on. It's just like take your pick. a story that I would tell where I felt my lowest is back in 2020, and this was before the pandemic. Like, my bank account, it had like cobwebs. Like, it was looking real bad. I was like, man, like, how am I been doing, I'm doing all this content and I'm selling beats, and it just felt like I wasn't really going anywhere. I felt stagnant, and I remember, because I always tell this story, I asked my fiance, and at the time, she was my girlfriend, but I was just like, she gave me $6 for a pizza. And that was like one of those points I said, man, I really got to be going through it, because I don't like to take money from people, just not how I am. And so that was one of those moments where I was like, man, I got to get it together. I got to figure out a way. And so the way that I overcame it is I had my friend Ryan, he had hit me up and he was like, hey, I'm doing this thing called ClickFunnels, which essentially is where you can build like an online funnel sales page, essentially put out a product and things like that. He's like, I'm doing a beat pack or whatever. So he told me how to set it up. So I set it up and I stayed up until like 2 in the morning. And I used this platform called ManyChat, and what that is it goes with Facebook Messenger, and you can send out like blasts to different people on your list. And so I sent out a blast and I was like, hey, I got this beat pack, and it was a wild deal, okay? It was 62 beats for $20. Like, if anybody remembers that ad, for all the people that have seen the ad, they were like, man, I remember you did that ad back in 2020. So it was 62 beats for $20, and anyone that sells beats would know that's crazy. Like, you wouldn't do that, right? But like at that time, I was like, man, whatever. Like, if it was working for my friend, we're gonna try it out. I got nothing to lose. So I remember the first day I made $200 just from that list, just from sending out to the list on ManyChat. And I was like, oh, okay, we could do something with this. So I started to run ads, and the first time I started running ads, it was terrible. Like, it wasn't doing that great. But then I recorded this video in my apartment at the time, and I did it all in one take. Like, that was the first time I'd ever done an ad with my face on it. So I had no expectations. I just like, well, it is gonna be what it is. And the video was so long, it was like 2 minutes long, which for a Facebook ad is super long. Like, they tell you to do like less than a minute typically, or like 15 seconds. But I put it up there, and I had no expectations. Like I said, that video ended up going viral, like, as time, went on, and it did 1.3 million views. And so that beat pack in itself, because it started to build and things like that, in 6 months that beat pack did 6 figures in revenue. And that was one of those moments where I was like, oh man, like, I really did this. Like, I was really needing $6 for a pizza just a few months ago, and then in 6 months, by doing, really being disciplined and dedicated myself. Now, what I will say, a lot of that money, was gone fairly quickly, because I didn't have that financial literacy to know how to manage the money. I was just so happy that I'm like, okay, I'm making this money. It's gonna be lasting forever. We out of here. And so I didn't manage it in a way that, now knowing what I know, how I could have. However, I needed to go through that experience for myself, like my own growth, to be able to see that as possible. Because once you see, 30K in a month, like, or you done $2,000 in a day, you can't go back. You can't unsee it. You're just like, okay, how can I do this better next time? How can I manage, so I got a lot of equipment at that time, a lot of VSTs and, different things in relation to my music career. I was getting stuff for other people, like my family and things like that, my parents, friends, and all that thing. All the things that I wanted to do, donating to charity, and like all these things that I wanted to utilize money for, and just hadn't had the opportunity, so I was just doing everything I wanted to do. So I don't regret it. Like, I definitely don't regret it. I just know that, like, now how I can definitely manage that money better, going forward. So what got me into making music is I had a family friend who had a MacBook, and he had Logic on it. was it Logic? It might have been, it was either Logic or GarageBand, but I think it was Logic because they kind of look the same to me, to be honest. But don't come at me in the comments if you're a producer. So I believe it was Logic though. Yeah. So he had a Mac, he had Logic on it, and I just thought it was cool. And he had his keyboard, like a really big keyboard. And so I remember making like a little beat in it with the loops that they had, and I was like, man, this is cool. So later on, I ended up getting a software called Mixcraft, which was the first software I ever used to make beats, and that's where it all got started. So I would just put together the loops that were in there and just try different sounds. And there were no tutorials really at the time on YouTube or anything like that, so you were just on your own doing what you could do with it. And so once I started college though, because I was making beats like in high school, and I was taking vocal lessons and piano lessons at the time as well, so like I was doing those kind of things. And I had one voice teacher who, she got me into like songwriting, and she was the first person that was around for when I started making beats. So I would show her my beats. I still remember I showed her this one beat I thought it was the best beat. Like, you couldn't tell me nothing, and it's just funny to think about that now. But, you know, I showed her that, and she gave me some feedback and things like that. So that was one of those moments where I started telling people more that I made beats. And then once I was a senior in high school, I had the opportunity to have my beats for our like morning show, and so they like shouted me out or whatever on the, you know, show, and like, oh yeah, you know, Jay made this, blah blah blah, whatever. So I just thought that was super cool, right? And once I got to college though, there was a guy who was an artist. His name was Jay Newton, and he introduced me to FL Studio. And so he put it on he showed me how to download it on my computer and things like that. And that's where I really got started, I feel like, with working with artists, because once I started on FL Studio, I just started playing around, making beats from scratch. Like, I wasn't using loops like that. I was actually just making them, because like I said, up until that point, I was using Mixcraft. So once I started using FL Studio, like, that changed the game for me, because the way you can do the drum patterns and like all these different things and making melodies, I was like, oh, this is cool. So I would have artists come to my room because I had the setup from the stuff that I got from Guitar Center with my dad, because my dad and I in high school, he took me to Guitar Center and got me my first like set of equipment. So it was like dope, because when you're in college, to have all that equipment is kind of a big deal, because not a lot of people, you know, have all that stuff in their dorm room. So I had like my mic, and I had my speakers and things like that, my laptop, of course, the audio interface and things. So it was just so cool. And I always say that everybody's an artist at least once in college, so it was pretty easy to connect with people, you know, that want to come and record. So I would record people. I was charging like $25 an hour or whatever, just to have people come and record in my you know, in my dorm room and things like that. And I was making beats, and so all of these things really came together, and I just really enjoyed it, and I had fun, and I started uploading on my website. And sometime or another, that's how you and I connected. I don't really, you know, I can't piece all the pieces of like when that first moment happened, but it's just so interesting how everything comes together, you know. So I had my website, I started putting beats up. I was putting beats everywhere. If it said beats in it, I was on there, you know. And so that was just my thing. I would message artists on SoundCloud like every single day, and just be like, hey, you know, I want to send you some beats. So there were just so many great moments of that start of making music to where I'm at now, and it's a beautiful journey, and I'm really grateful, you know, to have been able to start that and be here. I think it's more people trying to discourage me than how I feel about myself, because I am very persistent. So until you show me, I absolutely can't do it. Like, there are certain things that like I obviously cannot do. Like, I can't walk. That is what that is. Like, that's not something that, like, or if I thought about it more, if I tried harder, like, that's why I utilize my chair, you know. And I did, at one point, I did use tried out a standard, but I was breaking too much, you know, so it wouldn't, and for how my body structure and stuff like that, it just wouldn't make sense. So it got to a point where it's like, oh, it's not even worth it. And even if I was using the standard, it wasn't that I was gonna be able to walk like, you know, run a marathon or anything like that. So, you know, for me, obviously there are certain things that I can't do. However, there are a lot more things that I can do. So I just like to focus on those kind of things. I think that in our community, specifically in the Black community, there is a lot of ignorance and unknown about disability, you know, and so I feel like with that, growing up, not only having disability, but also being Black, like, that's another layer, because there's a lot of things that we don't talk about in our community. And when it comes to disability, that's like one of those topics, like, you know, Johnny, he's not disabled, he's just a little different, he's a little special, he a little, you know, it's all these other things, instead of recognizing, like, okay, the disability that they do have, maybe they need access to certain resources, tools, services, things that could help have them have a better quality of life instead of ignoring it, right? So that's something that I would say in general for someone that has maybe a kid or an adult, or, you know, in their life or whatever, that is disabled, like, obviously not making it where you're putting them in a box of like what they're not able to do, but also recognizing the things that they can't do. Like, how can we make this better? How is there a service that can help you, or therapy, or whatever, you know what I mean, or something, some kind of tool, you know, and resource that can help make their quality of life better. Because the more that you ignore it and kind of deny it, you're really making that person's quality of life worse, because there are things out there that may help them have a better life. Like for me, if my parents decide to say, oh, he's not disabled, he's just gonna walk, well, that would be silly, because I needed a wheelchair to be able to get around, and it's helped my quality of life. Like having a power chair to be able to move, I'm able to zip around here. You gotta catch up, you know what I mean, if you're not careful. So those are the types of things that I think with education and seeing more people like myself out here doing things, I hope that will help people know that, like, yes, I may personally have to do things differently, but it's not that I can't do things. I just, you know, I gotta be given the chance to, you know, do it, you know what I mean? So I think it's been more of a society thing, less of how I actually feel about myself, because I know I can do a lot of stuff. I think it's just like sometimes when people see me for the first time or see other disabled people, they already have a preconceived idea of what they're capable of, instead of giving them the room to do things, you know what I mean? And so that's why representation is so important to me, because there needs to be that kind of representation in the world, just to show people like what's possible. Because disabled people, a lot of disabled people are really capable of doing incredible things, just whenever given the chance, or don't have the resources, or just are not listened to, and their voices are not heard. So, you know, for me, I just do what I can to, you know, represent my communities in the best way that I know how, and I'm here now. So I would say advice for anyone, whether you're disabled or not, is just stay disciplined and keep going, because like a lot of people are not going to understand your vision because it's not theirs. It wasn't given to them. So like a lot of times for me personally, since I am a full-time entrepreneur, a lot of people in my life, they had projected their own concerns of what they were experiencing in their life. So like, you gotta do this, you gotta get a job, because how are you gonna be able to make money doing this, and this? Because it was my vision, because I knew what my purpose and what my gifts that I was given. I wasn't concerned about the how it was gonna happen. I just knew it was gonna happen. So everything that has happened for me is due to my persistence and discipline, and not letting other people's ideologies and perceptions of what's gonna happen in my life until it's proven. Like, if let's say I did all this and it all failed, which it hasn't, but in theory, if it all failed and it didn't work out, well, okay, I would just have to find another way to navigate and adapt. So sometimes you are gonna have to adapt. Sometimes, you know, the way that you do it may not be the right way, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing it. Maybe you're an artist who is putting out songs and your first song doesn't do well. It doesn't mean quit. It doesn't mean, oh man, I can't do music anymore. You know what I mean? It just means find a way to adapt. Find a way to, you know, pivot and maybe do something differently. And that's the thing that I would say for other people is adapting, being disciplined, and not letting other people's perceptions of like what you can and can't do get to you, because you are more likely capable of more than you even think. And the last thing I would say too is think bigger. Like sometimes we don't even, we think so small that once we hit that level, it's like, oh, okay, I did that. So like when I hit 6 figures in revenue for that beat pack, that was always a goal. Like, oh, I want to get 6 figures, and then I did it, and I said, oh, okay. Like, so, which was great. Like, I was happy about it, but like thinking bigger. So think bigger for yourself, because you're capable of so much more. And so that's what I would say. Like, I know that was a lot of advice, but I feel like encompassing everything is just like think bigger, adapt, and don't let people stop you from what you know you can do and what you're capable of. As long as you're not hurting nobody, like no hurting anybody, you know what I mean? You got this.